coming, and I will try to tell you a little bit about this national effort that we have started to develop a national course on geohazards. And when I prepared this lecture, I actually realized that now is a horrible time to present this course because we're in the middle of developing everything and our heads are full, and I think this very structured overview of what we have learned is just starting to develop within this group of teachers. But I will at least give you an overview of what we have done so far, and also some thoughts of how this has been received by the students, and what we would like to do further on to further develop this. So just a short overview of what the course actually is. The goal is to provide the students with a basic understanding of both the geohazards themselves, but also the potential impact on society. And I think this is what also makes this course a little bit different from many other courses that we're teaching at the geoscience departments, that we have actually quite a significant social science component in the course. So this is a course that we started teaching in Bergen back in 2016, and then we have completely rearranged the course this year and launched it as a national course, which is taught in parallel in Bergen, Oslo, and Tromsø, using the same teaching materials, but all teaching is done locally at the individual institutions. The teaching materials have been developed by the experts within each geohazard nationally. So the teaching materials on landslides have been developed by the landslide experts. Those on flooding have been developed by the flooding experts, and so on. And in total, we've actually had more than 20 different national experts providing materials to this course. It's supported by iEarth and the National Geohazards Council, so they have also been quite deeply involved in discussing the contents of the course. And we have a very strong focus on student active learning in the course. So then what we do is that we have a very broad course. We don't go in depth with actually any of the topics that we're dealing with, but we give a broad introduction to geohazards, consequences, and how to handle those. So as I mentioned, we've had more than 20 experts contributing to this, and they come from a range of institutions. You see them here. Of course, the main contributors are the 3 universities where they're being taught. And here in Bergen, I'm teaching the course together with Felix Halpap, who is assisting in the teaching. In Oslo, it's mainly Jose Cepeda who is teaching, and in Tromsø, it's Louise Wick. And then we've had this range of experts from NGI, NGU, Norse, Statens Vegvesen, UNIS, and NVE contributing in various ways with exercises or educational videos, video lectures, or other things. So as I mentioned, the teaching is mainly, or is almost entirely student active, and this is done mostly in flipped classrooms. And this year, we are doing most of these flipped classrooms digitally. The way we do this is that we have split the materials into 11 thematic teaching packages, we call them, and each of these then cover one or more themes. I'll show you a list in just a few slides. And each of these packages is covered in a 2-hour class session, and usually we have one of these per week. And then in addition to that, the students are working on practical assignments throughout the semester. So we have 2 GIS projects, we have portfolio assignments, and so on. And the assessment is a portfolio assessment, so we don't have an exam. So they're graded entirely based on these projects that they developed during the semester. What's also special for this year is that we have very many of the activities, both in the flipped classrooms, and these portfolio assessments are done in groups. And these groups are fixed throughout the semester. So I'll come back to many of these issues in the next minutes. So the topics that we're covering in the different packages are listed here. So we start off with a kind of introductory package where we define hazard and risk and describe how we can do hazard and risk assessment, talk a little bit about disaster management in general and so on. Then we give an introduction to geotechnics, slope stability, landslide classification, and in the same package also we squeezed in the quick clay slides. Then we have a full package dealing with slope failures in rock and debris. We have a package on snow avalanches, and then we follow basically a package per hazard for flooding, earthquakes, volcanic hazards, and tsunamis. We have one on extreme weather events, and then towards the end of the semester, we focus on more like event interaction and cascading events, and we have a more regulatory focused package on regulations, economic impact, insurance planning, and so on, where the NVE, of course, is heavily involved in developing that. So in addition to the classes themselves, we have an excursion, which I'll show afterwards. We have, as I mentioned, GIS exercises, and we have these portfolio assignments. Now here we have the students working on 3 major projects. One is a poster, which they develop in groups based on a small research project linked to the excursion. And they just handed in the second version of this poster last week. Then they're working individually on a term paper where they have to describe some geohazard event that they choose themselves and its consequences. And then we end with a risk communication project where they work in groups again to develop some risk communication product. So that can be a song or a poster, or it can be a leaflet or a Snapchat account, or so it's very flexible what they do, but they have to consider target group and the way that they present the information in relation to the target group that they're addressing. The excursion is running over 2 days, and just to say, this is a photo from last year's excursion where we didn't have to maintain this meter of distance. And here we take the students out to the field. From Bergen, we go to Western Norway, and we look at different hazards, so mainly landslides and floods in the field, the impact, and also at various protection measures. And we always have NVE with us in the field, and usually also Statens Vegvesen. They unfortunately couldn't make it this year, but usually they also describe some of the warning systems that they have on E16. And then, as I mentioned, we have this poster assignment that is related to the excursion. On last year's excursion, we went to Jølster, and we did that actually also this year, but this photo in the upper left is from last year, where we could see just a few weeks after these massive landslide events, we could watch these in the field. And then this year we took the students back to the same place, and we could look at the mitigation measures that have been implemented at that location. And also we went to another landslide in the same area, where the students could actually go on the landslide deposits and study these in more detail, and even also look more, dig with their hands into the landslide deposits. So I think this gives the students a very valuable hands-on experience with these things, and puts the scale of such events into a perspective for them. So as I mentioned, we have portfolio assessment in the course. We have a long list of mandatory activities that if they follow the course actively, then they can tick off these quite automatically. So they have a field book they have to hand in. They have to have approved quizzes that they do in the flipped classrooms. They have to have the portfolio assignments approved. They have to have the GIS assignments approved, and they have to hand in a reflection note in the end of the semester. And then the grading is done based on a combination of these quizzes that we run, the term paper and the communication project. And the weighting has been set up so that the grade is set 50% based on individual work and 50% based on group work. We decided to let these quizzes that we run in the beginning of each flipped classroom count in total 20% of the grade. And that was done after long discussions because we had identified a potential issue that if we didn't have some kind of motivation for the students to attend classes, then and prepare for them, then we had a risk that some students would choose to only focus on the portfolio assignments and not really follow the teaching through the semester. And we wanted to avoid that, and we thought that it could be maybe useful to have these quizzes count a little bit of the grade, because this would leave the students the freedom to actually choose not to attend classes if they for some reason do not want to do that. I mean, that's fine with me, but they would be at least forced to prepare for the classes and go through the materials that we provide for them. And that has actually turned out to be very efficient. For these larger projects, we provide very detailed rubrics so that the students know exactly what they're going to be graded on. And I can show you an example here. So this is the rubric, or the beginning of the rubric for the term paper. And you see we have various criteria between 15 to 20 for each assignment. And then we have different levels of achievement, high, medium, or low, and with a short description of what we expect in order to fulfill this high achievement for the various points here. So if any of you are interested, you can contact me and I can send you these rubrics if you want to use them for inspiration. Then in the flipped classrooms, we ask the students to prepare well at home. So we give them a usually quite long list of preparation materials that can be textbook chapters, videos, video lectures, and other literature. And then we follow a quite fixed structure in classes. So we start with a quiz and spend about 15 to 20 minutes on that. So we usually give the students 12 minutes to complete the quiz. And then we go through the results and describe a little bit the questions where we see that many had a wrong answer. Then we have about 1 hour for a group exercise where we usually first define the exercise and then the students are working in groups, and then we call them back and we go through the exercise or discuss it or something in the end to kind of round off. And then for the last 10 to 15 minutes, we ask them to write a short reflection note on the class that we have just been going through. So as I mentioned, the preparation materials are usually this mixture of textbook chapters, educational videos, video lectures, and scientific papers, and sometimes also other things. And we always split this into mandatory materials, which is kind of a minimum requirement. And then we give some supplementary material for those who are interested. In some cases, we also ask the students to prepare for the class activity. That varies a little bit. And then we always provide a list of learning outcomes so that they can use this as a checklist to see if they have actually covered what we would like them to have covered. And this is also giving some indication of what we could maybe ask about in the quiz. So this shows a typical example of a page in Canvas where we list the preparation material. So here we have like a textbook chapter, and then we have embedded various videos. It could also be video lectures or links to web pages or other things. The feedback we get from the students is quite clear. They like very much watching videos, most of them, and are not so keen on reading long texts. And actually, as long as things are in a video format, they're quite forgiving in terms of the duration of the video and how, we see how sexy it's presented. I mean, it can be actually quite long lectures with just a PowerPoint presentation or somebody speaking over it, but it's still strongly preferred to reading the same materials in the textbook. So that's interesting to see. This is also just an example of learning outcomes for one of the packages. The number of points that we present varies quite a lot. This is one of the shorter. We also have some which are significantly more points that we expect the students to familiarize themselves with. Okay, for the class activities, this is a list of what we've done so far. So we started off with an exercise where the students were finding information on various natural disasters in a given country and comparing to other potential hazards and presenting that. Then we had 3 more, I would say, technical activities, one where they were doing slope stability modeling, one where they did landslide mapping based on PDF files, comparing information in various maps and using this to map landslides. We had an exercise on avalanche hazard mapping based on either GIS or PDF files again. And then we've had 2 more discussion like exercises that have been focused on finding information and presenting this to class, first of a flood event and then of an earthquake event, but with very different, target groups for these presentations. What we've seen is that it has been challenging, especially with these more technical exercises, to work in the digital environment. We've done all of these in Zoom mainly, and there have been a lot of technical issues. For example, just this landslide mapping exercise, which is very simple in principle, turned out to be very challenging because the student need to find a shared document that they could work in and then manage the technical issues of importing these PDF files as transparent figures and so on. And this ended up actually taking a lot of time and a lot of focus from the actual learning. So that's something we have learned, that we have to modify some of these exercises if we're gonna keep continuing digitally, and also to focus these maybe a little bit more to reflect better what the students have done for their presentation. So this is definitely a learning process for us. As I said, in the end of each class, we asked the students to write reflection notes. And this has also been something that has ended up taking actually quite a bit of our time to phrase the questions we ask in a good way. We started off with a long list of questions to the students, and they were writing a lot of things, but didn't reflect too much on their own work. And then we tried reformulating the questions, asking them only to reflect on their own work, which resulted in them giving us an evaluation of the class. So then I was talking to Eva Normo and airing my frustration that actually we didn't get the information back that we were hoping for, and he helped us then define the questions that are listed here. And these we've been using for a couple of weeks, and now we actually get both some very valuable feedback on the class itself, so on the preparation materials and how the students find the activities that we're doing, but also some thoughts from the students on how they are learning and what they're doing and how that affects their learning. So that's quite nice to see. And the information that we get here is very valuable for us in order to be able to prepare the course, to improve the course, and also to implement some of these improvements actually during the semester, instead of having the course evaluation at the end of the semester, and then it's basically too late to do anything for the students who have provided us all this information. So we have very much group work in the course, and I decided this year to have fixed groups throughout the semester, and that I would define the groups instead of letting the students do that themselves. The reason for that is that when I've had group work earlier, the groups have tended to be very homogeneous. So we have had one group with all the female Norwegian bachelor students, another group with the female Norwegian master students, and then similar male groups for the Norwegian students. And then we had a group of the Spanish exchange students and one of the German exchange students, and then one of the rest of the exchange students, basically. And I saw a potential for actually the students helping each other and learning from each other much more if we would be able to mix these groups. So I define the groups by basically making first a list of all the Norwegian master students and distributing those in groups, then taking all the Norwegian bachelor students and distributing in groups, and then taking the exchange students and also distributing them evenly in the group. And in this way, we have very heterogeneous groups, and that's actually working very well. Then we are trying out what's called peer evaluation in the course. And the aim of that is to improve the cooperation skills for the students and also to make the group assessments more fair. And this is a concept that we're borrowing from team-based learning. And a peer evaluation is basically a chance for the students to give each other feedback on their contribution to the group work. So after the major group projects, and we have 2 of those, we ask every student to provide a short assessment of their fellow group members. And they're asked both to give a score from 1 to 10 on the contribution of the individual group member to the group, and also to give some constructive comments to that person. For example, it's very nice that you are active in discussions, or maybe you're a little bit too dominating in the group, or I wish you would come to classes so we could hear your input, or things like that. And then, since this is new both for the students and for us, we have decided that with the first group assignment, so the posters, this doesn't count in the grade. So we just give the students the feedback that is given to them, and they can hopefully use this to improve their contribution to the group for the rest of the semester. And then for this final risk communication project, we ask we let these peer evaluations actually also influence the final grade that they receive for that assignment. So we've now just received the first round of peer evaluations, and actually these comments that they're giving to each other are very constructive, and I think they will be helpful for many of the students in their further work. So this is interesting to see how this will develop in the semester. We need, of course, to have a very intense information flow with the students when we're teaching the course like this, both because of the digital teaching, but also because the students need to come very well prepared to class. So I'm spending actually quite a lot of time setting up things in mid-UIB, which is our Canvas system at UIB. And the way I've set it up is that we have an entry page where we have easy links to a course schedule and to the various course modules. And then we are running everything through modules. So this is the student view of Canvas, and you see the students have actually access basically to the modules and not a lot of other things. And then if they click here, they come to this overview of the different modules. So then we have a module for practical information, one where we collect all the assignments, and then one for each package. And for each package, then we have the preparation materials listed, a link to the quiz, a link to the class activity, and this reflective writing exercise. So this makes it quite easy for the students to find information and to navigate through the course. Yeah, I must say it takes a long time to set up these things, but I would strongly recommend using this module system because it actually gives a lot of opportunities and make things quite easy to follow, I think. I thought I would share also just some thoughts on going digital. Of course, our intention when we developed this course was that we would be able to sit in a classroom with the students during these flipped classroom sessions and discuss things and have much more contact with them. But yeah, things turned out differently. And there are some both pros and cons to that. We have very high student attendance. I think this is partly because it's digital, especially because we have classes Monday morning at 8. And I think, yeah, it's maybe a little bit easier to just turn on the computer at that time of day. Of course, also, I think the quizzes have quite a lot to say in terms of the students showing up. And also, I mean, for me, with children dragging home all kinds of flus and stuff from school and kindergarten, it's nice to actually be able to teach from home. That has turned out to be useful this semester. Then we see that we can actually do quite a lot in the breakout rooms with the students. So especially these discussion-focused assignments, they run quite well in breakout rooms. And it's very typical to see that when we start the class with some kind of introduction, then everybody have their screens black. Then we send them out into breakout rooms, and when they come back, then most people have their cameras on, and they actually also keep them on for the rest of the discussion. So we see that these breakout rooms are very useful for facilitating discussion among the students. The disadvantage is that it takes quite a long time to identify like small issues and especially technical issues in the groups. It seems that the students are less likely to ask for help when they're in digital breakout rooms compared to if they're sitting in the class and can just raise their hand. So we've had some cases where actually several groups were having some technical issue, but it took us a long time before we realized that and could then take a kind of common session to solve that. I also have a feeling that there's a bit less social interaction in the student group. And especially I feel that I don't know my students as well as I usually do. So I don't have this feeling for the student group that I would usually have. And that is a pity. It's useful then to have these reflection notes coming in, because at least this gives us some feeling for how things are going, but it can't really be replaced by this personal contact that we would usually have with the students. And then, of course, there's these ever returning problems with poor internet connections that I think you're all very familiar with. Now, this is a national course, and I would also like to reflect a little bit on some aspects related to that, because I think one of the main arguments for making this national course was that we could exploit the expertise on the various geohazards available throughout the country. And I think that has worked quite well. I mean, we've had really the experts contributing to the different packages. And this has been a great advantage, but also has raised some issues because, of course, many of these people are not used to teaching, and they maybe don't always have a very good feeling for what are the activities that the students are able to complete, have a good learning outcome from completing, and what is actually the ideal way of designing teaching activities. So I think it's important that we are deeply involved in the discussions with these experts, and that it's made clear that that we will have to, in some cases, modify the materials coming in to a format where it's more useful for the students and their learning. Then I think both for the students and for the contributors, it's a great opportunity to see potential employers and create a closer link to geohazards out in the real world. And I think by having these video lectures and other materials provided from various institutions, these institutions become a lot more visible and present, and you also often get a face related to these institutions. One very, very nice aspect of this national course has been the teacher cooperation. I think we've had quite close contact within the teacher group. And I think it's very unique to have the opportunity to actually discuss with people who are teaching exactly the same thing as you while you're teaching it. Because we can have discussions such as, this didn't really work in my class. How did it go with your students? Did they like it? And try to identify differences and find out how we do teach slightly differently and how that is then working with the various students. So that is something I can definitely recommend also to others, to try to have these teacher partnerships or corporations across institutions. Then one thing that we were intending to do was to have more contact also among the students at the various institutions, and that hasn't been happening a lot this semester, partly due to the COVID situation, and partly because I have kind of promoted that we should focus on getting this course up and running locally before we start having a lot of cross-institutional cooperation. I think that was important in order to maintain the quality of the course. What we have had is that the students from Bergen and Oslo were jointly on the excursion. Now they had to keep a long distance between the different groups, so we didn't have too much interaction, but at least we had some of them talking over a beer in the evening and so on. And I think in non-COVID times, this will be actually a very good chance for the students to network and discuss. Then we were also planning to have a joint poster session in connection with the National Geohazards Day, but unfortunately that was cancelled this year, so we couldn't do that. And then we have some ideas for next year and for the future. One is to have a peer review of, for example, term papers across institutions. I think that's something that could be nice to implement. Also, someone suggested that we could have Q&A sessions every week with the experts on the given topic of the week, and that could then also be joint for all the institutions. And we may even decide to have joint student projects across the institutions for maybe one of the portfolio assignments or something like that, but we have to see how that is practically implementable. Before we started, I was thinking of also having more fully integrated teaching, so have the students working in groups with students from all institutions jointly. But I think with the experience from this year and this fully digital teaching is really not recommendable, and that I wouldn't prioritize going in that direction. I think the learning outcome from the student will be better if they would be able to stay only locally. Then a bit on student feedback. We sent out yesterday morning a questionnaire for a midway evaluation, and this has been answered by now only by 10 students. So it's far from all the students who have contributed here. It's my feeling that it's actually quite representative of the general mood among at least my students. So therefore I present it anyway, but there should be this small warning that it's only 10 students. So what comes out is that the workload is considered fairly large for the course, though, most think it's not completely impossible. Students prepare for classes, almost all of them, all the time. And the motivation for doing that is that they want to pass the quiz and to learn about geohazards, so that's quite nice, but that's the main motivation. But then also to, of course, be able to participate in the class. And also somebody mentioned that contributing to the group was an important aspect for motivating the preparation. Then we got some feedback on the class activities, which I think personally is the weak point of the course at the moment. And you see there's a range of answers to whether people feel they actually can apply their knowledge during classes, and I think that's something we can definitely improve in the future. When it comes to rating the classes, they're split, so half of them like it, half of them don't, and I think this is related to whether you like working in flipped classrooms or not. And then also some of them are frustrated with some of the assignments that we have given, and some of them with good reason, because there have been quite some technical issues at time. The motivation to attend classes, I guess, is a bit more spread. Strongly, people want to be there, contribute to their group. So we've managed to actually build up a very strong group feeling, which is quite nice. Surprisingly, actually, 40% say that they come because classes are mandatory, though they are actually not. So that's an interesting observation. Then we asked about the group work, because really they're working almost all the time in these groups, and this tends to be quite positively received. So many of them like the group work quite well. And if they are to rate the course as a whole, they're fairly satisfied, though there are some that are not so happy. And I think those are especially those who are not so keen on this flipped classroom teaching. So that's fair enough, I mean. So just some of the comments we've received. One says here that the fact that quizzes from each lecture matters for the last grade makes it very important to focus on this course during the week. So the quizzes, and that's also my feeling, is really what keeps the students attentive to the course and why they prioritize always preparing for this course. And also there's one mentioning that the group activities are a good motivation. One is mentioning here that the involvement of NVE in the excursion was very positive, and that the excursion was nice. And then there's one here, telling us that I feel like almost all the teaching is done by me, by the work I put in, and not in lectures from teachers like other classes. And I think that's actually meant like a little bit of a criticism, but I think it also shows us that we're successful in having the student active teaching. And then we are maybe failing a little bit in communicating to the students why we choose to do it in this way. The group work is highlighted by many to be a very positive aspect of the course, and then the overall, as you saw, evaluation is quite varying. So one say I learn a lot in an interesting way. Another says here, drop the flipped classroom model and return to having actual classes. No one likes this way of doing it. There's not this is not the reason why I go to university. And I think this is an important feedback. It's difficult to do anything against. I mean, you will always have students who hate this way of teaching, but we have to also be able to give these students a good answer to why we're choosing to teach like this, and that is not just because we're lazy and don't want to spend time preparing lectures. And I can then at least tell you that it takes a lot more time to teach in this way than to just give a lecture. So this shouldn't at least be the motivation to do it. Okay, so to summarize a bit in the end here, what we've learned so far, students do what you want them to do if you tell them what to do. So I think communication is really crucial. You have to provide very detailed information on every assignment you want the students to do, and then they actually also tend to follow your instructions. We've learned that it's very difficult to design good class activities, and that these activities should not be too technically challenging, and they should be very clearly explained. And this is where we really want to do some development work onwards. We also learned that most students prefer watching videos to reading texts, and that it's very useful to provide these learning outcomes, as they almost serve like a checklist for the students to see if they have gone through and understood all the preparation materials. Then the quizzes are doing the job. They're motivating the students to participate and prepare, and also they're giving us a lot of information on how much the students actually understand. And usually we have about 70–75% correct answers to the quizzes. So they're doing fairly well in the quizzes. And then these reflection notes are turning out to be very valuable and giving us a lot of information on the course. But of course, they need to be followed up in order for the students to keep writing these throughout the semester. They need to see that we are actually reading these and trying to make changes to the extent possible. So what's next? We'll finish teaching the course, of course, this semester. And then we're working on 2 parallel subtle projects, one to analyze the student learning, and also one focused more on what we are learning as teachers. This is in cooperation with the iEarth group, and quite interesting to see. Then we will analyze these reflection notes that we're receiving in more detail to guide the improvements of the course. And then we'll also try to involve the students in improving the course for next semester, or for next year. And I think that was it. So thank you very much.